Okay, well, welcome to a special presentation of History of Tony. As she said, they asked me to do a thing on the Festival of the August Moon, which is really kind of a celebration of Greek culture, but more importantly, it kind of celebrates the beginning of the Olympic year. If you're a sports fan, you know that the Olympics uh, will take place next summer in Paris, France. And so this is what we're going to be doing today is talking about how the Festival of the August Moon got started, as well as the origin of the ancient Olympic Games. So with that being said, let's get into it. Here we go. So the August Moon Festival is a festival celebrated in Greece on the day of the full moon in August, which happens to be today. It also happens to be the brightest moon of the year. That's called a supermoon because the orbit of the moon is closer to the Earth than it is any other time. And this is a really unusual year in the fact that there are two full moons in August. If you don't know, when you have two full moons in the same month, the second one is called a blue moon. Some of you may know about the old songs that talks about blue moons. So this is really a spectacular astronomical event, as well as a historical event and a cultural event. The day ushers in several festivals for the upcoming year, with the most awaited being the Olympic Festival, which will take place next summer. They were originally started as an homage to the Greek god Zeus, who was kind of the king of the ancient Greek gods. In the beginning, they were a religious celebration, and they developed into a kind of an athletic celebration, a pan-Hellenic celebration where all the Greek city-states got together. But then it developed where it also featured sculptors, poets, to display their works in hoping that someone would become their patron. They were held every August according to the old Greek calendar. Of course, that's different than our present calendar. We use a Roman calendar, Julio-Claudian calendar, but the Olympic Games were held in August of every year at the beginning of the full moon, which is what they are celebrating in Greece today. They were held at a little village on the western side of the Peloponnese Peninsula, and I'll show you a map here in a minute. And although the games were conducted in the name of Zeus, other gods were worshipped there as well, not just Zeus. Now, a lot of people get confused about this, and I'm going to be honest with you. I was confused about it for a long time myself. So Olympia, the site of the Olympic Games, is not on Mount Olympus. Mount Olympus is in the northern part of Greece, actually in Macedonia today. That is where the ancient Greeks thought that the Olympians resided, was on Mount Olympus. But the games were not held there. Now, the Olympic Games were held, like I said, they were the most important and prestigious of these games. But they held a game every year, not just every 4 years. They were in honor of different city-states or in honor of different gods, but without a doubt, the Olympic Games became the most important. So let's look at a map here. This is Greece, and this is Macedonia up here. Of course, this is present-day Turkey. If you'll notice, here is Olympia. This is the Peloponnese Peninsula, and that is the village of Olympia, where the Olympic Games were held in ancient Greece. There's the city-state of Corinth, which was an extremely important city-state. There's Athens, city-state of Thebes and Delphi. This is Mount Olympus. This is where the Greek gods supposedly lived, upon Mount Olympus. So it was not a situation where the Greek games were held on Mount Olympus. This is the present-day ruins of Olympia. You can go there. There's still many ruins there. Obviously, I've never been there, but you can go there and see many of the different ruins. This is Mount Olympus. As you can see, it's a beautiful mountain. Greece is a very mountainous, forested country. You've listened to the news, you might be aware they're fighting forest fires right now in Greece. terrible forest fires, and that's because they do have such a huge mountainous forested area. So how did these Olympic Games get started? Well, let's look at the mythical origin of the Olympic Games. There's many variations concerning the mythical origins of the Olympic Games. One of them has Hercules, the greatest of the Greek heroes, racing his four brothers to Olympia in order to entertain Zeus. And the winner was going to be crowned with an olive wreath, which of course is now the symbol of the Olympic Games, the olive wreath. That's one story. There's several different stories about how they got started. Another involves the son of Zeus, who was also named Heracles, not the same Heracles, established a festival to honor his father after he completed his 12 labors in return for immortality. If you know anything about Greek mythology, Zeus wanted immortality. In order to do that, he had to perform 12 different labors. And these labors included things like slaying a mythical lion, the Nemean lion. The 9-headed Hydra had to be slain. He had to capture the Cretan bull. He had to clean the Aegean stables. He was also required to obtain the girdle of Hippolyta. And I'm hoping I'm saying these words right. I can't speak Greek, but I've tried to figure it out. The queen of the Amazons. He had to steal 3 golden apples of the Hesperides. And he had to capture the hound of Hades called Cerberus, which guarded the underworld. So, in order to do all this, he held a festival after he had completed these 12 labors. And that, in a sense, was the starting of the Olympic Games. The most accepted myth is the one concerning the Titan moon goddess Selene. Selene would traverse the night sky, according to ancient Greek mythology, in a silver chariot, the moon. And she had fallen in love with a human, Endymion, and with whom she eventually ended up borrowing $50. I'm not even going to go there, okay? Which represented the 50 lunar months of every 4 years. This marked the beginning of the Olympiad, which was a 4-year cycle. That's where we get the Olympics from. So that was the original mythology, at least 3 of them. There were many more than that. This here is a sculpture of Heracles slaying the Hydra. This is Selene, the moon goddess, and you'll notice she's got a crescent moon up here as part of it. So, these are very big figures in Greek mythology. So how did these games get started? Well, Aristotle, the great Greek historian and philosopher, said that the date of the first Olympic Games was 776 BC. And that's a kind of an accepted date. There's actually some history, there's some documentation, and it was about this time that the Olympic Games are thought to have been started. And like I said, they were held every 4-year intervals in the time span known as the Olympiad, which we just talked about Selene and how that got started. In the beginning, it kind of started off because different groups were fighting to control the sanctuary of Olympia, this place where Zeus was honored. Eventually, they figured out that wasn't going to work very well because they were killing each other off. So they decided to move into athletic events to determine who would kind of control the sanctuary. The events themselves seemed to evolve out of early hunting practices, which were then turned into more socially and peaceful sporting contests. So if you just think about some of the Olympic Games, like javelin throwing and stuff like this, these are really more hunting games. The running events, they are kind of out of hunting events that these things got started. The first accepted event was a running contest of approximately about 200 meters, a little bit short, called a stade, from which we get the root word for stadium. With longer races being added, the Dialis, which was a 2-stage race, 400 meters, and the Dolichos, which was 24 stages, approximately 5,000 meters. They eventually added wrestling, boxing. Then they added the discus throw, a long jump, And then they combined events of running, long jumping, discus throwing, wrestling, and a new event, the javelin, into what was called the pentathlon, or 5 combined events. Later on, they also added equestrian events. Horse racing and chariot racing became really big. Of course, these are no longer part of the Olympics, but they were in the beginning. Now, it's important to know that there was a lot of rivalry in Greece. It was comprised of city-states. It was not a united country, and they were often at war, as you will see here in a minute. So during the Olympic Games, there was a truce declared, and it pretty much held. The city-states of Greece were pretty good about not really, breaking this truce. And the events basically were held in safety. It ensured that visitors and participants could go there without any harm. Now, it was only open to men. Women were absolutely not to be there. The result was that they always conducted these events in the nude, which the Greek word for that is gymnos, which is where we get the word gymnasium. So you can see a lot of athletic things going on here. Winners of the events were, of course, crowned with the symbolic olive wreath, which is still true today. So here's some different representations. That, by the way, is the ruins of the stade, the running surface. These are the original starting blocks. We have starting blocks today in racing. That's the starting blocks of the stade. This is one of the winners being crowned with an olive wreath. Here is a representation of a discus thrower. I believe this is by Byron, which was a copy of a Greek thing, a Roman copy. You can see different urns being painted here. This is the wrestling, the boxing combination. Here we have the javelin throw going on. So now, as the games progressed, they kind of were centered around the city-states. A city-state in Greece was called a polis, which is where we get the root word politics. And these city-states were often in conflict, while at the same time dependent upon each other for trade, military alliance, cultural interaction. Competition for resources often resulted in open warfare between the city-states. But during the Olympic festivals, as I said, there was a truce observed. Armies were forbidden to go into Olympia during the Olympic festival. And like I said, for the most part, it held. Even in the worst of times, the city-states respected this because they so respected their gods. By 500 BC, if you know anything about your ancient history, you know that Greece was kind of in the throes of what becomes known as the classical age, led by the city-state of Athens. I mean, this was one of those periods of times when it seemed like knowledge just exploded. Literature, art. You have people like Socrates and Sophocles, the playwright, and great sculptors like Phidias. And it was just a absolutely tremendous time of gathering of knowledge. This is kind of when the expansion of the Olympic Games really began to take place. Up to this time, there'd been, so-so. Now, during this classical age of Greece, led by Athens, they just exploded. And the Olympic Games really, really became big. To some degree, ironically, this occurred because the Greeks, which had always been kind of a conglomerate of city-states that didn't get along, was invaded by a foreign power, the Persian Empire, between 492 and 480. And in order to be able to defeat the Persian Empire, they had to come together. These fractured collection of city-states, which were constantly at war, had to come together to fight. And they end up basically developing what became known as a pan-Hellenic civilization, where they begin to work together. Once the Persian invasion was done, then they turned their attention to building up Athens and other city states as well, and particularly Olympia. And it became just a huge village dedicated primarily to Zeus, their chief god, and it just was developed into a beautiful, beautiful city. Now, this is somebody's representation of Olympia. This would have been the Temple of Zeus, which we'll talk about more here in a minute. Up here in the upper right-hand corner, that is the Stade. That's the running events. These are different temples to different gods, lesser gods than Zeus. That's an amphitheater, and these are probably just smaller temples and buildings. And these were probably like places where people that participated in the games could stay. So this was a kind of a representation of Olympia at its height. So, without a doubt, all these buildings that were built in Olympia during the classical age, the most important was the Temple of Zeus, the chief god of the Greeks. They began the construction primarily to Zeus around 489 BC, and it lasted till 463 BC, about 25 years. Built from local limestone. And to be honest about it, they said when it was done, it wasn't really very pretty. So they decided they were going to coat it with stucco to make it look like it was marble. They probably regretted building it out of limestone to begin with. Also, that didn't help because if you know anything about rocks, you know that limestone is very porous, very soft rock, and it didn't last as long as it should have. They did roof the shrine with marble. And they said it was cut so thin that it was translucent, so that on a summer's day, the light would shine through and illuminate the inside of the temple. The edge of the roof had 102 waterspouts, according to historians, in the shape of lion heads. And there are still 39 of these in existence. So, we know that that was the case. Now, around the 2nd century AD, there was a Roman historian by the name of Pausanias who visited the Olympia, and he did a very good job of describing the Temple of Zeus and the statue inside, which we'll talk about in a minute. He actually took the dimensions. He said the temple was about 68 foot tall, about 95 foot in length, and in breadth, and about 230 foot in length. And he said you would approach it from a front porch, and that was had an exterior set of columns in a 6 by 13 arrangement. In other words, 6 across the front and the back, and 13 along the sides. And then there was an inner chamber surrounded by 2 rows of 7 columns. And he said that it looked a lot like the Temple of Hera at another village called Pestrum, and that is still standing today. It was built of more stable stone, and we'll show you a picture of the ruins of the Temple of Hera in a second. This eventually became one of the 7 wonders of the world, according to the famed Greek historian Herodotus. When he named the 7 wonders of the world, this was one of them. He said it was so majestic and so magnificent. Here is the ruins of the Temple of Hera at another village. And so apparently this was kind of what the Temple of Zeus looked like. This is some of the existing frieze sculpture. They had sculpture that would line the top of the temple. And this was some of the frieze that lined the top of it that still exists today. They still have that. Within the Temple of Zeus was a statue to Zeus. And this was just a massive statue, approximately 40 feet tall, according to Pausanias again. The commissioners, the custodians of the temple in Olympia decided they were wanting to have a statue of Zeus placed inside the temple, obviously. So they hired off Phidias, who had done the temple of Athena that was located in the Parthenon in Athens. Well, Olympia wanted to go one better. They said, we want a bigger statue and a better statue. So they hired Phidias to carve this statue of Zeus to be placed inside the temple. And again, Pausanias who visited in the 2nd century AD, and the temple was still there and the statue was still there, described it very accurately. He said it was ivory and gold panels on a wooden substructure. So the substructure was wood, and then it was overlaid with ivory and gold. Stood about 40 foot tall, which would have been, basically a 5-story building. Head was crowned with a wreath of olive sprays. He wore a gilded robe made from glass. It was carved of animals and lilies. In his right hand, he held a small statue of Nike, the goddess of victory. And in the left hand, he held a scepter inlaid with many metals and supported by an eagle. And he was set up on a throne of painted figures, wrought images, and decorated with gold, precious stone, ebony, and ivory. I mean, it must have been just an absolutely spectacular statue. He further said that the statue was kept constantly coated with olive oil to counter the climate's harmful effects upon the ivory. And wanted to keep the ivory white and pure, and so they would coat the statue with olive oil and keep it coated. And in order to do this, they had kind of a marble pool in front of it. The floor itself was black tiles, and there would be olive oil inside this marble container here, and it kind of acted as a reservoir, as a reflecting pool. And they said it kind of doubled the height of the statue as far as the appearance. Must have been something else. So you might ask yourself, what happened to the statue in the temple? Well, we know for sure that in 391, the Christian Roman Emperor Theodosius I banned participation in pagan cults. And that included the Olympic Games because they were a celebration of Zeus. And so we know that the Temple of Zeus fell into disrepair. And we are pretty sure that the statue was taken to Constantinople and eventually was destroyed in a fire around 475 AD. There were a lot of, as you know, the Roman Empire was disintegrating in the 400s, and many cities were set on fire. And apparently the statue was destroyed during this great fire. So it no longer exists. And most of the Temple of Zeus no longer exists. This is a modern day sculpture of the great statue of Zeus. This is in the Hermitage, which is a big museum in Russia, in St. Petersburg. And this is not a full-scale copy. This is a smaller representation that, and I'm not sure who did this. It was done, I believe, in the 18th or 19th century. And this is a representation of what the statue of Zeus, they thought it would have looked like. So you can just imagine this thing coated with olive oil, just shimmering with the translucent marble shining down upon it. It must have been just a really spectacular event. It's no wonder that Herodotus named it as one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. So what happened to the Olympic Games after this classical age? Well, again, if you know anything about your Greek history, your ancient history, you know that Athens and another city-state, Sparta, got into a disastrous civil war at the end of the classical age, became known as the Peloponnesian War. And this event just destroyed really much of Greece because they were so at war with each other. The Olympic Games remarkably held. They continued on. There was not a lot of interference because, again, they respected their gods enough that even these warring city-states would stop the war long enough to have the Olympic Games. Of course, in such a weakened situation, Greece, as we now call it, was ripe for invasion. That's exactly what happened in 338 BC when Philip II of Macedonia, which is northern Greece, invaded and defeated all these Greek city-states and kind of brought them together under his control. We know that Philip II, supposedly, according to historical records, actually, participated in one of the Olympics and was actually recorded as the winner of the chariot races. Unfortunately for him, he didn't last long because he was assassinated by some of his military people. And his throne was inherited by his son, Alexander, who we know as Alexander the Great, who would go on to conquer almost all the old Persian Empire, the Middle East, Egypt. He basically controlled the whole Western world as we knew it at that time. As long as he was in charge, everything was held. But he himself died very, very young, in his early 30s. And once he died, his empire was split into divisions by his military underlings. And the result was that the Olympic Games begin to fade. They begin to fall apart. Eventually, the Romans took over Greece in 146 BC, and the Olympic Games became then pretty much a localized sporting event instead of the pan-Hellenic event that had become in the classical age. So during the early part of the Roman invasion, the Olympic Games kind of just basically almost disappeared. Well, here is a map of Alexander's empire. As you can see, he controlled basically the whole known world for all practical purposes. Egypt, Turkey, Greece, all the old Persian Empire, clear over to India. So what happened to the Olympic Games during the Roman Empire? Well, the Roman Empire came into being around the 1st century BC under Julius Caesar. He was succeeded by Augustus. Augustus is kind of the generally accepted to be the first Roman emperor. And he controlled basically all of Alexander's old empire. Just, he basically combined the whole known world, Western world at that time. He was very infatuated with the old Greek culture, as were a lot of the Roman emperors. And so he decided to kind of revive these Olympic Games. And so Augustus set about restoring the Temple of Zeus, the statue, as well as most of the other buildings in Olympia. So they once again became an important event, only this time under Roman rule instead of Greek rule. But remember, the Greeks were kind of they were the cultural dynamos of the ancient world, and even the Romans, they basically adopted the Greek culture as their own. Augustus was succeeded by Tiberius, and Tiberius reportedly he actually won a chariot race in 4 BC. And then he was succeeded by Caligula. If you know anything about Roman history, you know Caligula was he was most certainly insane. And he became the epitome of everything that was bad with Roman emperors. He was so insane that he decided that he was going to have all the old Greek statues of gods brought to Rome, and he would have their heads taken off and replaced with the head of his own. He was going to basically become deified with all the Greek gods. And he ordered that to be done with the statue of Zeus. Thankfully, someone assassinated him so they could do that. His reign did not last very long. And if you want to read about a crazy man, read about Caligula. He was crazy. His successor was the famous Nero. We know him, of course, as the man who presided over Rome as it burned around AD. Also the man who was involved with the persecution of the Christians, the early Christian church. He was absolutely fascinated with Greek culture. Nero considered himself a poet, a sculptor, an athlete. He thought he was what we would call today a Renaissance man. And so we know that during the 211th ancient Olympiad, he actually traveled to Olympia. And according to the records, he won every event. Now, obviously, you know what happened. Here's the most powerful man in the world who comes to Olympia. And I'm sure the people that ran it said, hey, if this guy's going to run, we're going to let him have it. And he won every event, even though they say during the chariot that he actually fell out of the chariot race and didn't finish, but they still crowned him the winner anyway. I mean, it was obviously his accomplishments were just a fabrication. And luckily, fortunately, thankfully, they have a stricken all those from the old ancient records. During the next 2 centuries, the Roman Empire, of course, eventually became a Christian state. And the Olympic Games were banished in 393 by Theodore the Great. And he said they are not any longer going to be held. We're going to do away with this. And the sanctuary was destroyed, as we've seen. The statue was brought to Constantinople, and as we've seen, it probably perished in a fire. So this is a painting, someone's idea of Nero running the chariot race. It doesn't show him falling out of the chariot and failing to finish, but that's what happened according to history. So how did we get to the modern Olympic Games? Well, in 1894, the Olympic Games just ceased. From this period of time in the Roman Empire clear up to modern times, there was no Olympic Games. But in 1894, a French historian by the name of Pierre de Coubertin, and I'm saying his name right, organized a Congress in Paris to present his plans to revive the ancient Olympic Games. He thought that it was time to bring the world together again under these events and to have them part of the world, to bring peace to the world. And so he proposed that they would resurrect the Olympic Games, with the first one to be held in Athens in 896. Athens was the biggest city and the most important city of Greece. Olympia just wasn't really able to do that. And so they decided this was what was going to happen. Unfortunately, they didn't have any money. The Greek government had been in existence for about 70 years now, but they had broken away from the old Ottoman Empire, and they were unstable financially and politically. They had never got it together. Greece was a really fractured country. They've always had political problems in Greece. Under the leadership of Crown Prince Constantine, who was the successor to the kingship there, he was able to secure financial backing. And finally, the first modern Olympic Games began on April the 6th, 1896. That was no accident. They chose that date because that was the date when the Greeks declared their independence from the old Ottoman Empire. So they didn't hold them in August originally. They didn't go back to summer. They were held in the spring. The first events, the traditional athletic events like cycling, fencing, gymnastics, shooting, swimming, tennis, weightlifting, wrestling. But they added a new event, the marathon race, which was approximately a 26-mile race. And we all know what we know about the marathon now. But this was the first time it was held as an international event. And it was held to commemorate the heroic run of a man by the name of Phidippides, who had run from the plains of Marathon, where the combined Greek armies had defeated the Persians in the Great Persian Wars of 490. And the story goes that he ran from Marathon to Athens to alert the leaders of the Athenian government that they had defeated the Persians, and promptly fell over dead, after running this 26 miles. So that's how the marathon race got started. There weren't a lot of nations involved: Australia, Austria, Bulgaria, Chile, Denmark, France, and Germany, Great Britain, obviously Greece, Hungary, Italy, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United States. And there were only men. There were no women in the first modern Olympics. Greece, thankfully, won most of the medals, but we won most of the gold. That was just the way it worked out. 4 years later, they held another Olympic festival at Chamonix in France. And this time they did allow women to participate. And then they started, of course, the Winter Olympics. So here is a photograph of Coubertin, the man who is kind of responsible for starting the modern Olympic Games, along with a poster celebrating it. This is the stadium where the events were held in 896 AD, or 1896 AD. By the way, that stadium is still in existence, and they still use it. It still looks remarkably the same. I believe this is a photograph of them carrying around the original first marathon winner. He was being celebrated, and they were carrying him around the inside of the track to celebrate his victory. So, what's going to happen next year? Like I said, the whole concept of this festival of the August moon is to open up the Olympics. And the culmination of this will begin a countdown to the 33rd Olympic Games, which next summer will be held in Paris between July 26th and August 11th. So kind of the same time as the August moon. The Olympic torch will be lit at Olympia, Greece. It always is. It'll be lit on April 16th, 2024, and it will be carried by a series of runners all the way to the Sorbonne University in Paris and that will, it will be timed in order to, it will be lit, the torch there will be lit at the University of, the Sorbonne University in Paris to start the Olympic Games. This is kind of a thing that's, they're preparing Paris right now. I hope they can get it done. Paris is in the midst of a lot of turmoil right now. And there's a lot of people that are concerned about whether or not this is actually going to happen, because there's a lot of problems going on in Paris right now. But, they're convinced it's going to take place. Now, if you happen to live near a Greek community in the United States, and there are many Greek communities in the United States that have a lot of Greeks, the Festival of the August Moon isn't just about the opening of the Olympics. It's about a celebration of Greek culture. Locals and tourists it's a day off. They basically will involve themselves. Like if you were to go to Athens, they will be visiting archaeological sites and museums, which will be open all night if the forest fires aren't going. And that they had to close the Parthenon, or maybe you don't, but they had to close the Parthenon not too many days ago because of the forest fires above Athens. The celebration of the August moon isn't just in Athens. It isn't just in Greece. It's throughout the world, particularly in the United States. There are more Greek people in the United States than any other country in the world other than Greece. I don't know if you know that, around 3 million. And they have festivals throughout August and September celebrating Greek culture, food, dance, more. And they absolutely, have a good time. I happen to live here in Southwest Missouri, the little town of Springfield, Missouri. Not little, about 200,000 people. And they have a Greek festival. There's a Greek festival in August. And it's not really huge. We don't have a large Greek population, but the ones that do claim Greek ancestry get together and they celebrate. This is a picture from last year's Greek festival that was being held. So if you happen to live near a Greek festival that's going on, I would suggest you maybe, if you can, go out and visit it, because from what I know about the Greeks, they have a great time, So anyway, I thought the best way to end this would be to listen to just about 5 minutes of traditional Greek music. So let's finish this up by listening to one of the great Greek singers singing one of the great old folk songs of Greece.
Ένα Σαββάτο βράδυ, καλέ Μαρία, μια Κυριακή πρωί. Αμάνα Μαρία, μια Κυριακή πρωί. Πω Μαρία, πω Μαρία, πω Μαρία, σ' αγαπώ. Πω Μαρία, πω Μαρία, πω Μαρία, σ' αγαπώ. Πήρα την για να σε παντρευτώ. Αμάνα Μαρία, για να σε παντρευτώ. Πω 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 Μαρία, πω 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 Μαρία, πω 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 Μαρία, σ' αγαπώ. Πω 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 Μαρία, πω 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 Μαρία, πω 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 Μαρία, σ' αγαπώ. Μήλο μου κόκκινο, ρόιδο βαμμένο, μήλο μου κόκκινο, ρόιδο βαμμένο, γιατί με μαράνες το πικραμένο, γιατί με μαράνες το πικραμένο. Πηγαίνω κι έρχομαι, μα δε σε βρίσκω. Πηγαίνω κι έρχομαι, μα δε σε βρίσκω. Βρίσκω την πόρτα σου μανταλωμένη, τα παραθύρια σου φεγγοβολούσαν.
Okay, well, that's it. I thought you guys might enjoy a little bit of that. I hope you've had a good time. I hope you've learned something about the Greek culture and about the ancient Olympic Games. And I hope that you've, enjoyed yourselves. So again, if you're happen to be around the Greek festival and maybe you can get a little bus up to take out to one of the Greek festivals and enjoy good food and dancing and singing. So be interesting. So I appreciate it. And I thank Township for asking me to do this. And for you that regularly visit me on Mondays at 2:30 when I do my presentations, I'll be seeing you then.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Hi, Donna.
Thank you.
Yay.
Where's our name on?
It was up here.
Oh, okay. That was good.